Welcome back to the channel. My name is Lisa Elvin Stoltari, and I'm a genealogist and a passionate traveler. Over the last year and a half or so, I've been featuring each fille du roi, or king's daughter, and getting to know their stories a little bit better. There are over 700 of them, so we've got a long way to go. Today we're on episode 174. Not too bad. But before we begin, I want to show you how you can support the channel. The first three keep you in the know. Subscribe, like, and notify. The next couple ways are ways in which you can help the channel grow. We have coffee and we have Patreon, and I've provided the links for that for you to explore that particular avenue. And also, since I've reached 1,000 subscribers a while back, YouTube has permitted me to put the super thanks right on the dashboard that you have, so you can support the channel financially with a super thanks if that's something you would like to do. And I want to thank all of you who have reached out. I really, really appreciate your support. So let's get started, shall we? So this was originally Marguerite de LaPlace, is episode 174. This was a viewer request. I reached into my files, and sure enough, one of my dearest, dearest friends, who was totally surprised she had French-Canadian heritage, this is one of her great-grandmothers. So I'm doing a shout-out to her, and I will be sending her the link for sure. So let's get to know Marguerite de LaPlace a little bit better. Marguerite was born in 1651 in Paris, France. Her parents were Jean de LaPlace and Geneviève Trouvé. She was born in the parish of Saint-Laurent, which can be found in the 10th arrondissement of Paris. Remember the arrondissement? Remember, you can see Paris on that left bottom is laid out in circles. So in the 10th circle is where she was born. And inside that 10th circle, 10th arrondissement, she was actually found in the Saint-Denis Faubourg meaning neighborhood. The church where she would have been baptized dates back to at least 583, when it was a chapel. And there has been a church here since at least the 12th century. The one we're seeing in the picture on the upper left dates back to 1429 and has been renovated several times. The tower is the only thing remaining from the 12th century church. Saint Laurent was the parish church of Vincent de Paul, Saint Vincent de Paul, from 1632 to 1660. Now the arrondissement, the 10th arrondissement, is called Entrepôt also, and it's situated on the right bank of the River Seine. It contains two of Paris's 6 main railroad stations, la Gare du Nord and the Gare de l'Est, the East and the North Railroad, and it contains a large portion of the Canal Saint-Martin, which links the northeastern parts of Paris with the River Seine. So it's kind of an important hubbub, if you will. So if you're planning on visiting this area, this is the area that Marguerite would have come from. After her father's death, she left for New France on the Saint-Jean-Baptiste and arrived in Quebec on August 15, 1671. She carried with her a dowry worth about 150 pounds. Upon her arrival, she entered into a marriage contract with a man named Marin Gervais, but it was canceled. And Marin would go on to marry fille du roi Françoise Moivoisin, who we have not yet profiled, but we'll see them again. And now, who would Marguerite eventually marry? So the groom that she selected and who selected her, his name was Pierre Lesiege de La Fontaine, and he was born in 1636 in a commune called Sarlat in France. It is now known as Sarlat-le-Canada. His parents are unknown to us. Now, this town, this commune, is now known as Sarlat-le-Canada because they were merged in 1965. It can be found in the region of France known as Nouvelle-Aquitaine, and the department is Dordogne. It is truly a medieval town that was developed around a large Benedictine abbey. The medieval Sarlat Cathedral is dedicated to Saint Sacerdos. I hope I'm saying that right. This abbey appears in records as early as 1081 and was one of the few in the region that was not raided by the Vikings, those darn Vikings. The name for the abbey church was Saint Sacerdos by 1318. In the 20th century, it would become a cathedral under Pope John the 23rd. Because modern history has largely passed it by, Sarlat has retained and preserved one of the most representative of the 14th century. It has so many historic monuments. It was added to France's tentative list for future nominations as UNESCO World Heritage Site in 2002. So it truly is an excellent state of preservation. So I would imagine that those descendants of Pierre could go there and imagine Pierre being there. So we have, and we have the church that he would have been baptized right there. And obviously in the upper right picture, this is what it would have looked like in the 14th or 15th century as well. Very, very representative of a medieval town. So Pierre would arrive in New France, as so many of our Filles du Roi's husbands would arrive, with the Gagne soldiers. He was with the Sorel Company, and he would arrive in 1665. So there's after his service, he would have decided to stay in New France and await possible Filles du Roi or someone to marry and form a life with. One of the reasons we don't know Pierre's parents is the fact that I have not yet been able to find the marriage record of Pierre and Marguerite. We know that they married sometime in 1671 or 72, but that is all that we know. So if you have any other information, please let me know and post in the comments below. So we do know that they did settle in a town called Lesiege. Let's get to know Lesiege a little bit better. So we begin with the study of La Belleterie, the legacy of it. So we have 1672, Jean Talon gives this land to Lieutenant Séraphin Margane, le sœur the lord of de La Belleterie in 1672, who had fought with the Gagne regiment. In 1699, Pierre-Paul Morgan I inherits the seigneurie. He is also a career soldier and would fight on the plains of Abraham for the French. In 1766, Pierre-Paul Margane de La Belleterie II would ultimately expand the territory to include such townships as Kildare. He would also be elected to the very first Parliament of Lower Canada in 1792. In 1810, Pierre-Paul's daughter, Suzanne Antoinette, would inherit the seigneurie. She would go on to marry Charles Gaspard Thériault de Lanaudière, who would marry, and the seigneurie would now become part of the Lanaudière family. Charlotte Thériault de Lanaudière, one of their three daughters, would marry Barthélemy Joliette, who would go on to become the founder of the town of Joliette. And that, my friends, is how the soap opera of Quebec works. It's just amazing kind of how it touches so many different towns. They would go on to have 8 children. Louise would marry François Coutu and have 16 children, 8 of whom would make it. Marie Marguerite married Michel Hilaire Frappier, and they had 15 children, 5 of whom would make it. Marie Madeleine married Pierre Brault, and they had 8 children, 3 of whom made it. Antoinette would die in infancy. Jean-François, we have no information on. François-Marie, again, no information. Etienne would marry Françoise Bergeron and have 5 children, all of whom would make it. Upon her death, he married Marianne Paris and had 2 more children, both of whom made it. His third marriage to Marianne Châtel did not produce any children. Joseph, we have no more information on, but we do have the 1681 census that lists Pierre, Marguerite, his children, Louise, Madeleine, Marguerite, Antoinette, who was 6 months old at the time. She's still alive. They have 1 gun, 1 Bézacorne, which is a goat, and they have 6 Alpins à Valeur, about 4 acres. So tragedy would strike. The only reason we know that Pierre was killed by the Iroquois is that in a later legal document for guardianship of the minor children, it was stated that approximately 8 years ago, the father was killed by Iroquois. This was in 1699 when the document was produced, and we can determine that the death of Pierre would have occurred 8 years prior. One man dies and another arrives. The next groom that would select Marguerite, his name was Pierre also, and he was Pierre Brebant de Lecomte, and he was born in 1670. Astute viewers can note that she was born in 1651, making 19-year age gap. So that's kind of interesting. He was born about the year she came to New France. In La Rochelle, France, his parents were Thomas Brebant and Françoise Picaret. He was part of the region. His region is Nouvelle-Aquitaine, and his département, remember, département is like a county, Charente-Maritime. And so La Rochelle is probably, as many of you who have viewed this series know that it was founded during the 10th century and became an important harbor in the 12th century. That picture below is really kind of representative of what they would have experienced. Until the 15th century, La Rochelle was to be the largest French harbor on the Atlantic coast. And the name, actually, of La Rochelle was first recorded in 961 as Rupella, which meant Little Rock. This town has probably one of the richest histories of all the towns of France. And it began as an area where the Knights of Templar had their strongest base. Eleanor of Aquitaine married Henry Plantagenet in 1152, who became King of England, and as Henry II in 1154, thus putting La Rochelle under Plantagenet rule, or English rule, if you will, until Louis VIII captured it in the 1224 siege of La Rochelle. And during the Plantagenet control of the city in 1185, Henry had the Vauclair Castle built. So that would have been something that Pierre would have seen while he was growing up. Obviously, La Rochelle is famous for the uprisings dealing with the Huguenots, which are the French Protestants who just wanted to, have their faith, and the French Catholics did not want anything. So many of the Huguenots would escape to New France. Do we know if Pierre was one of them? No, we do not. We do know that he was baptized in the parish of Saint-Jean, and that is the church. And there's a kind of an illustration that I found as well of the church where Pierre would have been baptized. He would eventually come to New France as a soldier himself. So they were married in Montreal on September 15th, 1696. So Marguerite and her new husband would add a new member to their family. Geneviève, born in 1697, would go on to marry Jean-Baptiste Robert and have 5 children, all of whom would make it to adulthood. Their happiness was not long-lasting, despite his age. Pierre would go first. He died he was buried January 7th, 1715. He was only 45 years old, and he and Margaret would have been married about 19 years at the time. Margaret herself would go on to live another 20 years, dying in 1735 at the amazing age of 84. And she would go on to, she was alive when they made that study in 1729, of 101 descendants as of 1729. Fascinating woman. I mean, she outlived 2 husbands, had all of the children she had, kept going. Just a remarkable story, remarkable. Here are my favorite resources. I have provided the links below. I do want to talk to you about number 3, Nos Origines, this episode. Généalogie du Québec et d'Amérique française is kind of a think tank where you can contribute, and very well sourced in some respects. Little errors, like in all genealogy, but fascinating focus and attention to detail. And I love going and seeing what the other members have put in. I absolutely use this resource as well. And so wraps up episode 174. Wasn't Marguerite's life amazing? To have survived and thrived until the amazing age of 84, surviving the ultimate tragedy of her husband to Indian attacks, and then remarrying again with such faith and defying custom and marrying a man 19 years younger than her. Although, I've noticed that a lot of the Filles du Roi did that. I still think it's quite remarkable. And going on and having another child later on in her life. I find her fascinating, and I was thrilled to be able to explore this life. So we thank Marguerite for her amazing contribution, for her pioneering spirit to be obviously one of the very first people to live in La Villeterie. And we also want to bless that she came to our shores, and we are thankful for her sacrifice. Until I see you on episode number 175, au revoir.